Now to the Russia-Ukraine war. We saw the show of strength from the US, including that stealth bomber flyover over Vladimir Putin's head. But overnight, we've had the Ukrainian leader, Zelensky, speak out about these negotiations. He had this to say.
The constitution of Ukraine makes it impossible to give up territory or trade land. Since the territorial issue is so important, it should be discussed only by the leaders of Ukraine and Russia at the trilateral Ukraine, United States, Russia. So far, Russia gives no sign that trilateral will happen.
Josh, he referenced the Ukrainian constitution there and called for further economic sanctions against Russia. How do you see this latest development?
Okay, so first of all, the optics of this meeting in Anchorage, Alaska on Friday were really incredible, Rita, weren't they? I mean, the B-2 bomber flying overhead. I mean, as they were walking down the red carpet, Donald Trump taking Vladimir Putin's hand and like physically pulling in for like the world's ultimate power handshake. I mean, the optics were just can't miss, unmistakable stuff. The problem here in this conflict, and Zelensky saying there what he's been saying for the past 3.5 years, which is that Ukraine is not ready or willing to give up an inch of territory. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you have Vladimir Putin, who simply thinks that Ukraine literally does not and should not exist as a sovereign, independent entity. It's very difficult, frankly, to see at this time what is an actual Venn diagram overlap sweet spot, a zone of possible agreement between these two parties there. So look, I mean, Donald Trump at times sounded somewhat frustrated after the meeting, at times sounded somewhat optimistic there. The details, I think, remain a little bit to be determined. But both of these men are going to have to budge there. I mean, Putin is going to have to recognize that Ukraine has existed since the downfall of communism and is going to continue to exist as an independent country. Zelensky is going to have to concede the reality on the ground as far as where the military troops are and so forth, that Ukraine is not going to have the same borders after this war that it had prior to the February 2022 incursion from the Russian army. On the other hand, Ukraine's going to have to accept as well that they're not going to join NATO and the European Union. So there's going to have to be a lot of give and take here on both sides. The rough outlines of a deal, Rita, I think are pretty clear. They've been fairly clear now for about 2 years, which is really probably 3 years, which is the most frustrating part of all this there. But again, these two guys just aren't willing to budge there. But you know what? Here's what I know. I know that if there's one guy who can actually get this through across the finish line, it's the guy who got the peace deal between Cambodia and Thailand, between Congo and Rwanda, India and Pakistan, Armenia and Azerbaijan, Israel and Iran. My goodness gracious, how many peace deals has this guy gotten just in the past 6-7 years, or past 6-7 months of this administration there? So we'll see if he's got one more trick up his card, Rita, but I definitely would not discount the possibility.
Now, the Democrats are turning on each other. Mayor Eric Adams has hit out at the man likely to replace him as mayor, Democrat and communist Zoran Mamdani, who, despite being a Muslim, Josh, wants to decriminalise prostitution. Well, Mayor Adams was calling him out on that. He's wondering what Quran Mamdani is reading.
I'm a man of God, just as Mamdani says he's a Muslim. I don't know where in his Quran does it state it's okay for a woman to be on the street selling their body. I don't know what Quran he's reading. It's not in my Bible. And so if that's his belief, it is dangerous for our city.
Josh, I've got to say, it's controversial, obviously, for Mayor Adams to say what he said, but I'm so glad he is calling out this unholy alliance that exists between, and Mamdani is really a good representative of it, this unholy alliance between the far left and Islamists, you could call them, who've got nothing in common other than their hate for the West and their hate of conservatives and Republicans.
Yeah, it's the old red-green alliance, and Zoran Mamdani is the singular encapsulation of this. By the way, so is this nut job running for mayor in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Omar Fateh as well. Exact same thing there. But Mamdani, Eric Adams is right. I mean, Mamdani is not a, shall we say, he's not a Hamas-style Islamist. I mean, this is not someone who actually believes in the universal binding nature of Sharia law. rather what Mamdani does is he takes kind of the identity politics aspect of his Islamic background and then takes it and kind of transmogrifies it, launders it through the prism of progressive politics. That's how you get him going all in on the globalized, the intifada stuff when it comes to Israel, when it comes to his anti-Semitism there, when it comes to his whole noxious DEI woke worldview. But I mean, this is obviously not someone who is a particularly pious or religious Muslim there. But Rita, I never fail to laugh, when these individuals come along. I think back more often than I probably should about a woman named Linda Sarsour. The world has probably forgotten that she existed.
Her.
But she was the leader of the Women's March back in 2017. And there were these old tweets of hers kind of lauding Sharia law and what it said about credit cards and interest payments. It was apparently a very favorable liberal policy there. I mean, has anyone asked Linda Sarsour, the leader of the Women's March, what Sharia law says about, I don't know, women and about like women's rights and all that there? So I mean, this whole Red-Green Alliance, Rita, I mean, as you properly say, it's all about destroying Jews, Christians, the West, capitalism, literally all of Western civilization. But I mean, it's a rather odd alliance, isn't it?
It is, and you know how it's going to end because those two groups really agree on nothing, and one of them is not particularly tolerant of anything that is not part of their belief system. Now, from one Democrat city to another, LA is a mess. Downtown LA is derelict, depressing place. It's getting some attention for just the huge crime, Josh, the homelessness, businesses boarded up. And we see this across the US in some of these big, former, glorious cities that are just shadows of their former self. What's the solution to this decay? They do have one thing in common. They are all ruled by Democrats and long term. But if the people keep voting for politicians who enable this, what is the solution? Is there a way to recover these cities and restore them to their former glory?
Look, I mean, not to sound like an ultra partisan, but you're totally right. I mean, virtually every state in America that has gone down the toilet over the past 3, 4, 5 decades on end, whether it's Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Memphis, Tennessee, St. Louis, Baltimore, Detroit, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I mean, there's just so many examples there. And, when is the last time there's been a Republican mayor in literally any of the cities that I just named? I actually don't know what the answer is, but I suspect it's been a very, very long time there. So, at some point, it's very difficult to help people, Rita, who don't want to help themselves. Like I have the same thought similarly as well when I look at the current situation in Europe, when I look at the horrible situation in the UK when it comes to these roving gangs of Pakistani Muslims that are doing all sorts of horrible things to little English school children there. I think, how can I help them? Then I also say, you can't help people who don't want to help themselves, whether it comes to importing, mass folks from Syria and Afghanistan who want to assimilate there, whether it comes to electing Democrats here. So it's a very difficult thing. But I do think a little bit about this quote from a great 20th century social critic and newspaper columnist by the name of H.L. Mencken. He was a famous early 20th century columnist here in the United States. And H.L. Mencken had this one famous quote, Rita, where he said that democracy is the theory that the common man knows what he wants and he deserves to get it good and hard. So I look at a city like Los Angeles, I look at a city like Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, and I say, you know what? This is H.L. Mencken's quote at work. I'm just happy for one, though, that I live in the free state of Florida.
Before you go, Josh, I just want to get your input about the NFL forcing its teams to participate in more activism, more pointless activism. The teams are being told they have to put up these messages on their end zones, things like end racism, stop hate. There's about a half a dozen social justice messages that they can choose from. But I noted that Harmeet Dillon, the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, had her own suggestion. She wants this to be on the end zone. No one is above the law. I can get bored with that sort of messaging, Josh.
Well, Harmeet Dillon, by the way, is absolutely fantastic. And the American people are blessed to have her in her current position as the head of the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ. I've been following Harmeet, known Harmeet for a long time there. So, she is one of many somewhat under the radar, amazing appointees currently serving the American people and serving it at a very high level. Unfortunately, when it comes to the NFL, Roger Goodell, the commissioner, has been down the woke rabbit hole for a very, very long time now. Now, Rita, a lot of these pro leagues here, the NFL, the NBA, they really doubled and tripled down on the woke crap after the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis back in 2020. But it's been literally over 5 years. I mean, it's been literally over 5 years. Donald Trump has been brought back like a phoenix, from his political death. He is now president of the United States a second time there. He is waging a war on DEI through executive orders, through judicial decisions, through an all of the above strategy there. And when are these remaining cultural institutions going to get it? But ultimately, Rita, in a situation like this, the onus does fall on folks like me, frankly. I mean, for someone like myself who is conservative, who nonetheless is a big sports fan there. I mean, I hate to say it, but I guess the onus really does kind of fall on us to really just turn the channel and, and not watch this and try to send the message, because that message actually does work. I mean, think about Anheuser-Busch Bud Light after the Dylan Mulvaney fiasco 2.5 years ago. Think about Target 2 years ago after they had the so-called quote unquote tuck-friendly clothing for children, the transgender stuff. Their stock went down the toilet there. So the American consumers are actually very capable of speaking out when companies disrespect their consumer base there. And unfortunately, again, as a sports fan, it's kind of painful to say, but I think that the NFL is probably the next in line for such treatment.
Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time today.